We'll do a review in the Sichos in Chelek Chav Beis, volume 22, and this is the second Sicha for the Parshas Acherei. The Rebbe explains a Rashi over here, the words in the end of the Parsha which says Ani Hashem Elokeichem. The Ani Hashem Elokeichem is brought down in many places in the Chumash, and here Rashi seems to give additional details, and a lot of details, what Ani Hashem Elokeichem means, different and with more details than elsewhere. So what the Rebbe explains this Ani Hashem Elokeichem, and the Rebbe actually brings out that the whole portion of Arayis, the prohibited relationships that is discussed in this parsha, begins with Ani Hashem Elokeichem, and it ends with Ani Hashem Elokeichem, and these are corresponding to each other. The first Ani Hashem Elokeichem is the positive. The second Ani Hashem Elokeichem is the negative. What happens if you do not do? And especially we're talking about Arayis. Arayis is a common problem, a difficult problem, and as we'll see in the Sikha, let's go step by step. Acherei Beis Aleph. Beim Soif von der Sedre is the Torah Messiah in Parshas Arayis. At the end of the Sedre, the Torah concludes the portion that deals with Arayis mitten onzog, with the instruction, Ushmartem es mishmarti, you should keep my guard, lebilti asois mechukis hatoeves goimer, so as not to do of these abominational statues. Don't do them. V'lo sitamu b'hem, and you shall not be defiled by them. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God. So this is the posik at the end of the Parsha Arayis. Stolzich Rashi ev diverter v'lo sitamu b'hem ani Hashem Elokeichem. So Rashi places himself on the words, do not defile yourself with them. I am God your God. And he's mefarish, and he explains, ha'im titamu. But if you do defile yourself, any Elokeichem, I am not your God. The atem nifsolim Acherei, and you are disqualified from before me. Umahano, or from behind me. Umahano yesh li bachem. What kind of a benefit do I have in you? V'atem eschayim kloyo, and you are guilty and you are condemned for destruction, for kloyo. There's a lot of details. The Rebbe will explain all the details, what it means precisely, specifically, but basically a lot of negative things will happen if you do mitame, you do Ein Elokeichem, plus the other things. And the Rashi concludes, Lekach nemar Ani Hashem Elokeichem. That's why it says Ani Hashem Elokeichem. So the Rebbe is going to question this whole end of the Rashi, basically, and all of the details of the Rashi, and also the last words of the Rashi, Lekach nem Hashem Elokeichem. What exactly, why is this different than all the time? Most of the time, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, we say, is Rashi explains either that I am Hashem Elokeichem, I am trustworthy to pay the reward, or Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am trustworthy to collect if you do not do the mitzvahs. But here Rashi can't say that, as the Rebbe explains, because it doesn't fit in the pshat. The tam farvos Rashi is mefarish the verter Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Rabbi Rashi is nit mefarish the verter Ani Hashem Elokeichem. The reason why Rashi does not explain the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem biyed is mefarish beparshas va'era, as he explains in the portion of Eida over there, he says, Ani Hashem neman liparachulu. I am Hashem, I am trustworthy, I will collect, in other words, I will punish. Or Ani Hashem neman litin schar, that I am Hashem, that I am trustworthy to pay reward. Why does Rashi change and not say it over here? Obefrat, especially Rashi could say it over here as a zok dort over there in Parshas Vayera. Rashi states as a zoyiz ani havaya nidrash bekama mekoymes, that ani havaya is expounded in many places to litin schar and lipora. So this is not something which is unique. So how come Rashi doesn't say it over here? So that we understand. Is vi mefarshim zayin and masbir. This, as the Mefarshim explain, that the inyan ani havaya neman lishalem schar ulipora, that Hashem is worthy, trustworthy to pay and to punish or to collect, is shegishtan and freya. That says earlier in the parsha, the beginning of the parsha already says ani Hashem alikecha. The riber hot nit kein or zu iber chazer und dem inyan noch einmal. Therefore, there is no room for the Torah to repeat this idea again. So why would the Torah say again, Ani Hashem Elikechem, that I am trustworthy to punish or to give reward? So Muzman Zogun, so that's why we have to say, as Ani Hashem Elikechem, meint an inyan chodesh. The Torah repeats it again, it means something new. That I am your God, and if you don't do the mitzvahs, then you're not mine. Ein Elikechem. But dafür wir verstehen den Pirush von Rashi, but we need to understand Rashi's commentary. In the Pasuk, it says just one thing, Ani Hashem Elikechem, so we can learn, but if you don't do it, then I'm not going to be your Elikechem. But we can't know more details as Rashi brings it down. From the Verter from Lo Yishtamu Bahem Ani Hashem Elikechem, from the word of Kemen Lechoira Nor Medayik Zayin. So from this we can only derive Miklal Hein Ato Shemei Alab, as we know that from the positive we can learn the negative. We're saying, I'll be your God if you follow these statutes. So we can derive from there, Ha'im, from this we can derive Ha'im Titamu. However, if you do defile yourself, I'm not your God. So that we understand. But from Vanent nemt Rashi the alle protim basar zok der noch. But where does Rashi take all the details that he says later on? That you will become disqualified from behind me. What benefit do I have in you? And you're condemned for destruction. Where does that come in? How does Rashi take that? What's the source for all these things? Now, granted, the Rebbe says this is what it says in Teres Kohanim, but the Rashi doesn't just quote the Teres Kohanim if it's not in the Pshat, and especially Rashi doesn't even say this is the Teres Kohanim. He just quotes it as if this is the Pshat. So where does Rashi take all this? And as Taka der Pirush state in Teres Kohanim. Yes, it is true that this interpretation is stated in the Teres Kohanim. But as spoken many times, is nit in Yonei from Rashi b'Pirusha ala Torah. It is not Rashi's idea. Rashi in the commentary on the Torah to mighty Zayin Droshes Chazal. Rashi does not just quote expounding of our sages in blessed memory. Rashi doesn't just quote them. As Rashi uses, says Loshen. And to just quote their language. This is exactly the language of the Teres Kohanim. But Rashi doesn't just quote them and quote their language. Ubefrat, as Rashi zokto nit iso b'Teres Kohanim. He doesn't say here, we find in the Teres Kohanim, or similar, which would show specifically that this is something from Teres Kohanim. He just brings it in his pshat. So this seems to be the way Rashi learns in the Pshat in the Pasuk. Was therefore is mucha. From this, it's evident as Rashi nemt on them pirush als pshutei shel mikra. That Rashi accepts and thinks that this is the meaning in the simple meaning of the posik. Das haste, which means as the verter v'lo sitamu bohem ani Hashem Elokeichem. And when the posik says, "Do not defile in them in these arayas, I am God your God." Bring in the rois the alle drei protim. They actually express for us the all of the three details. Atem nisoli me'acharai. That's one detail that they express. Mahano yesh li bochem. And what benefit do I have in you? Va'atem ischayvim kloyo. And you are condemned for kloyo. So these are all three comes from the pasuk. So how do we get all these things from the just one word of Hashem Elokeichem? Is to move from vanit is der hechrech im shute shel mikroiv di protim. From where do we have the proof? What forces us in the simple meaning of the pasuk to tell us about all these details? Well, maybe what does it mean when Hashem says, "I'm not your God"? Maybe these are explaining. We're saying, "I'm your God if you follow. If you're not, I'm not your God." What does it mean, "I'm not your God"? These are details of meaning when Hashem says, "I won't be your God." But if that is the case, then Rashi already said before this concept that if you don't follow, then I'm not going to be your God. And he doesn't explain over there, what does it mean, I'm not going to be your God, that it means all these three things. You cannot answer that as Rashi moves that Rashi needs to, or at least he wants to, mefared zayin to detail. Faran ben Chomesh Mikro before the 5-year-old who's learning the Chumash. Then badait fun eni Elokeichem. In Algemein, he's trying to tell you what is the meaning, I'm not your God. What does it mean? These are the details of what I'm not your God. We can't say that. Weil dem Teuchen von eni Elokeichem gefindt man schön früher in Pirush Rashi. This idea that I'm not your God, we already find it earlier in Rashi. From Pasuk in Parshas Lech Lecha, on the verse in Parshas Lech Lecha, it says, "V'nosati lecha goymer eretz Canaan goymer v'yisi lahem leilikim." So over there in the Parshas Lech Lecha, I said, "I will give to you the land of Canaan, and I'll be for them to a God." So Rashi explains, is Rashi mefarish avol hador b'chutz la'aretz, but one who lives outside of Eretz Yisrael, is as if he has no God, because I give you Eretz Canaan, then I'll be your God. But if you b'chutz, I'm not your God. So what does it mean over there? I'm not your God. Rashi doesn't explain over there that it means all these details. Rashi is thereby nit moisiv kein biur. Rashi does not add any interpretation. Rashi does not mention there any details of exactly how it manifests itself. What does it mean? So why would Rashi need to explain over here the meaning that when it says it means these details? And finally, the Rebbe asked, the end of the Rashi is even more is also problematic. Because what does Rashi say? Euch is nit moving the Haisofa Visiyum. From Rashi, we also don't understand the addition and the conclusion of Rashi. Lekach ne'emar ani Hashem Elokeichem. That's why it says ani Hashem Elokeichem. So, what is the Rashi Meisif? What is Rashi adding? This is therefore it says this is sort of a language like we're answering some sort of questions. Rashi says that we're answering here somehow. Therefore, it says, what's the question? What's the lekach ne'emar? But more than that, the Rebbe says. So First of all, what is he trying to tell her? L'kach nemar ani Hashem Elokecha. But more than that, the Rebbe explains now that asks that in the beginning of the Rashi, we quote all the words of the pasuk. Also, B'loisi tamu. Rashi should have said L'kach nemar v'loisi tamu ani Hashem Elokecha, but because we're explaining all of it. Why does Rashi just take out the words L'kach nemar ani Hashem Elokecha when the whole commentary is on the entire end of the pasuk? Noch von Ascholas Pirush Rashi was stellt sich auf die Werte. From the Rashi's beginning, Rashi places himself on the words, do not defile yourself in them with the statutes, with the ways of the Goyim. And then it says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Those are the opening words in the Rashi from the Pasuk. Is mashma. So since Rashi quotes this from the Pasuk, as the Schwierigkeit in Pasuk is euch in die Wörter, that the difficulty in this verse is also in these words, v'lo yisitamu behem. That's why Rashi quotes them. So how come at the end, ubesim is Rashi mighty blois, but at the end Rashi just quotes the Wörter ani Hashem Elokeichem, and therefore it says unit v'lo yisitamu behem. It doesn't explain the v'lo yisitamu behem. So why does Rashi just say, why does Rashi say, L'kach nemar ani Hashem Elokeichem? And why does he only say ani Hashem Elokeichem and not the beginning of the Pasuk L'yisitamu behem, which Rashi quoted in the opening in the Dibur HaMaschil from the Pasuk? It seems that that's also the issue here. The Rebbe explained this by first showing us that the portion of Arayis is unique, that the Torah goes through a whole introduction and with a whole arichas at length before it tells the actual prohibition. And that means that there is, in this mitzvah, in the beginning, we have to sort of make sure this is a hard mitzvah to keep, and therefore we have to make sure, and we need all this introduction to keep on encouraging people not to violate it. And then we have a similar at the end, that even if after we went through all the encouragement, and then we have to say again to further encourage. And these beginning encouragement and the end encouragement should line up, and that's what Rashi is lining up over here, as the Rebbe will explain. Base. We'll understand this by first explaining the Rashi's commentary in the beginning of the portion of Arayis. So the pasuk starts off the section of Daber Bnei Yisrael Gomer. So Ani Hashem Elokeichem. So Rashi is mefarish b'pirushei habeis. So Rashi gives there two interpretation, and the Rebbe will address later on also the first interpretation. But what is the meaning of Ani Hashem Elokeichem in the beginning of their introduction? So Rashi is mefarish b'pirushei habeis. Rabbi Eimer, Rabbi says, Golui v'yodua lefanov shesoifon linatek be'arayis, that it is revealed and known before Hashem that in the end they will detach themselves through the arayis, the prohibited relationship. Lefikach bo aleihem b'gezeira, and that's why Hashem comes to them with a decree. He says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Rashi says that Israel says, I am God, your God. So what does it mean? Du'u mi goizer aleichem. No, who is it, the one that is putting this decree upon you? That dayan lihipara, he is a judge who will collect for not following. V'neman l'shalom schar, and he is Taurus worthy to pray reward for those that follow. Is l'chayda, need move on. This seems to be not understood. Du'u mi goizer aleichem. know who is the one that is decreeing, that is Hashem. That seems to be one aspect. It's Hashem. And the other two aspects, the Dayan li Pora v'Neman l'Shalom Schar, he's a judge that collects that, and he's worthy, trustworthy to pay the reward. That seems to be two separate, different pirushim in Ani Hashem Elokeichem. How do I know it's different? How does Rebbe know that it's different? Because Rashi sometimes uses one of them. Could the muchach derfun was become erter? How do you know it's different pirushim? Because in many places, many places, but Rashi is mefarish oif ani Hashem. Rashi explains ani Hashem. He will say neman l'shalom schar. I am trustworthy to pay the reward. Or there are sometimes Rashi will explain that neman lihipora kayetz b'zeh. I am trustworthy to collect payment for not obeying kiyetz boy, or a similar lashon to this. Zokter nit the hagadome, but in those places Rashi does not give the introduction. The umi goyzer aleichem. You should know who decrees upon you. So that means this part, know who decrees upon you, is different. Unazoili idoch, and the same thing is on the other hand. Bekamo mekoimes is Rashi mefarish. Only the first idea. Rashi says, Ani Hashem gozarti aleichem. I am Hashem, I made the decree upon you. I atem reshoyim lihipoter. You are not able, you are not allowed to exempt yourself from this. So this is a lashon of Rashi in Acherei Yud Ches Dalet. And then in other places is Dami gozer ala dover val yekal beinecho. Know who decreed upon his pashas emer. That know who decreed upon you, and there shouldn't be light in your eyes. Und is there by nit moisim, and over there Rashi doesn't add nemon l'shalim sochar ukiyetzuboy, that he's worthy of repaying the reward. So the question is, why would the pasuk say over here? Both Rashi explains that Ani Hashem over here means both worthy of paying or collecting. And first Rashi says, Ani Hashem, I am God. No, that I'm Hashem are the one. And Rashi doesn't combine these Pirushim here. Rashi combines both Pirushim together. From Van nemt Rashi, where does Rashi know this? As Ani Hashem Elokeichem b'nidin dedan, that Ani Hashem Elokeichem in our case in the pasuk in the beginning of Arayis meant Beidin Yonim. How does Rashi know this? That this means both things, both that I am Hashem and I will collect. Du'umi goizer aleichem. Know who is the one that decrees it upon you. And that he is a judge who will collect, and he is trustworthy to pay the reward. The answer is because we find something unique by Parshas Arayis, which we don't find anywhere in the Torah, this whole big introduction. So that tells Rashi that Ani Hashem here is a more general and includes more things. Is there bir bazeh? Is the explanation in this? By Parshas Arayis, gefindt men adover miyuchad. We found something unique by the portion of Arayis. As eider the Torah hebt on to mefarish zayin di protei ho isurim, that before the Torah starts to detail to explain the details of the prohibition, state hagdama klolis. So there is a general introduction. In welche besteht von kama v'kama inyonim. And this general introduction consists of many different ideas over here. first it says Kimase Eretz Mitzrayim Goimer, as the act that the land of Mitzrayim, where you're coming from. And also like the acts of Eretz Canaan, that's the land you're going to, Loi Tasu, don't do so, Goimer. Then the verse says, as Mishpotai Tasu, you should do my laws, Ushmartem es Chukoisa, you should keep my statutes. That's how do we start this whole parsha, the Psicha from the Rakdoma Klodis. So what is the opening of the general introduction is by Daber Hashem Goimer, Daber Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Bnei Yisrael, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I'm God, your God. This is the pasuk that we were explaining, that Rashi was explaining, do mi goizer aleichem neman li pora shalvscha. Der Tam for was teure git azag doma klolis va'arucha umeruba. Why is the reason that the Torah gives such a general introduction, a long and detailed to the portion of Arayis, is moving bepashtus. So this is simply understood. Arayis seinen doch azach was nafshoy shel odom isabelahem. Arayis are a matter that the human heart, soul yearns for them. To such an extent, the person is so drawn after it, as afilu noch di Allah azhores, even after all of these warning, is Rashi bringt up, as Rashi brings down, quotes Kinal, soifon lenatik be'arayis. At the end, they'll detach themselves with arayis. The riber, and because it's such a challenging, it's such a difficult mitzvah, fodern sich divrei zirus. That's why it's necessary words of encouragement. Un merere as horis, and many warnings to Bavorenen, in order to caution as mezol zain obgehit in them, Beinstein them nisoin, that you must be careful in it so that you can withstand the test. Okay, so that's the general reason why we have all of these warnings and all of these introduction and details. Bald as there ani Habaya Lekechem state in their Pesicha, since Ani Hashem Lekechem is written in the opening, from the Hagdoma Klolis, from the general introduction, is the Riber Mistaber, therefore it's logical. Ados is an Inyan Vizirus Kloli, this is an idea and a general encouragement. Und das is der Tam, this is the reason, was der erste Pirush von Rashi, the first. We didn't quote yet, but the first portion of Rashi, Vani Hashem Elokeichem, I am God your God. How does Rashi explain that? Rashi says in their Pesicha is Kibaltem Aleichem Malchusi Ma'atem Ma'ato Kablu Gzereisei. Since you had accepted me as your king, you accepted my kingdom, so now you must accept my decrees. An inyan, this is an idea, hachi kloli. This is something, a very general concept of accepting the Hashem's decree. Kabbalah's oil mitzvahs, to accept the yoke of the mitzvahs, gezeres, Hashem's decree. So you see why, because we are talking about over here a general warning, cautioning before the whole arayis that we're going to discuss. So, is kidei or kidei zu bevayer sein. So, in order to explain the euch leuten zweiten pirush, how also according to the second interpretation, as ani Hashem Elokeichem is as hora, nit nor ev kavalas gzeres bechlal, that even according to the second interpretation, we wanted to say this is more general. That Ni Hashem Elokeichem is a general, not just of generally, nor the Iker of Inyan Harayis, So that it's more than just on the arayis is oh, oh, nor the iker of inyan harayis. So we wanted to say that this Rashi wants to say, even though Ani Hashem Elokechem is relating specifically to the arayis, but we're trying to say it's not generally, but arayis is Ani Hashem Elokechem. In addition to being the general for, but we're actually making it a more general for general mitzvahs, like according to the first one. That because this is a general psychoklolis for the all of the arayis, was the farish of psicha parsha is Rashi mefarish, so that's what Rashi explains as the loshna ni Hashem Elokechem b'shtei do, that this that it says here ni Hashem Elokechem is koilel kama protim, that includes many details. Yet der Wort is merames eif abazundere hazhora. Each one of these words, Ani, Hashem Elokechem, hints to a separate warning. This would make it a more central, not just as Arayis is negay, but a more general, as Psichoklolis, that it has a specific meaning. The word Ani means do mi geizer aleichem. Know who decrees it upon you. It's Ani. Hashem, Nemon l'shalom schar. That worthy of paying, trustworthy of paying the reward. Elokechem is dayan lipora. Elokechem comes to teach us that word hints that is a judge to collect. Was the drei inyonim, these three aspects, seinen koilel alle ifanim klolian. These are the old general ways durch welchen men kann bewirken am Menschen, how we can impact and convince a person beherrschen the type is that he should control his desires. Wegen welches redt sich in der Parsha, about which the Parsha talks, but these are general ideas that apply everywhere. Chodje Zayin and starke taivas canal, although they're very strong taivas, but by saying these three introductions, those are Ani, Hashem, Elokechem, are the three main categories through which a person, we can impact him to control himself. How so? The Rebbe is going to explain how Gimel. When you want to hold a Jew back from a very big lust, a big desire, darf men ihm zum allem ersten sagen. First, you have to tell him, Du mi geizer aleichem. Know who is the one that decrees upon you. Dar wissen und gedenken. He needs to know and remember. Ados is a gezeide von dem Ebersten. This is a decree from Hashem. The Beire ha'elam umanhige, the one who created the world and runs the world. Remind him who is the one who decrees so. Und der Riber is unmöglich, and therefore it's impossible. As durch noch geben the type hepech rotzen habeire, that if he's going to give in to his desire, which is contrary to the wishes of the creator of Hashem, so lim zayin good, it should be good. It can't be good. Because if you know that it's Hashem who gives the decree, then it's impossible for you to be good by doing against it, because it is Hashem who runs the world, created the world and runs it. So you can't make it good for yourself if you go against Hashem. Kennt sich aber einer proven einreden, but then one can try to convince himself. Im art nit was Acherei morokalo. He doesn't care that he knows at the end it's going to be bitter, like a lana, like a bitter vegetable, like a and as the pasuk says, the Acherei morokilano, and in Mishlei, aber abi wird derweil hano haben von der Taiva. But he says, right now I'm going to enjoy the Taiva. So the end, okay, it's possible to be good, but I'm going to enjoy it while I can. The roof kommt die zweite Warnung. That's why we have the second warning. Dayan lihipora. He is a judge to collect. Now, it doesn't say here to punish, but it says to collect. What does it mean to collect? Rebbe explains. Farn over sein von Rotzen Hashem, for violating the will of Hashem, bekommt man der noch nicht stam anoinus. Later on, what you get is not just a general, just a punishment. You get punished. Nor in an oifon von piroin. The punishment comes like a payback. Dayan lihipora. He's a judge to collect. The Eibishter git an oynesh. The Eibishter gives a punishment. Welche is a piroin. It is a payback. Kehrt he brings back. His bottle the ganze hanoa was hat gehabt von der Aveda. The entire benefit that he had from this Aveda. Azoi, in such a way, as blight by him gornit nor tzar. It remains nothing of the enjoyment, nothing of what you think you get. The temporary benefit does not remain, and all what you're going to have is what you have is pain. That means the language of collecting. He collects it. That means that he brings it back. Returns. In other words, there is no all of the benefit is returned. All what you remain is with pain. So so if that's the case, so then the question becomes, Lama osa Hashem kocha. Why did Hashem make it such? Why did Hashem create him? That should have such strong desire, such lust, that he cannot withstand. Then you tell him the third part, the third idea. He is trustworthy to pay reward. The Eibishter will give a Yidin socher. The Eibishter wants to give a Yid reward. Und der Star stellt man ihm vor eine Soyen. And that's why you put him for the test. Kedei soll beistehen dem Nesoyen und der Fahr bekommen Schar, so that he should be able to overcome that test and get reward for it. That's why the Eibishter has done it, to give you reward for it. Was schwerer this is the Aveda zu beistehen dem Nesoyen, the more difficult it is to withstand the test, to overcome the test, and he will get more reward. So this is now explains to us how this is an introduction before the Arayas, which is a very difficult Aveda to know, that it is Hashem who gives the decree, and you can't get any benefit if it goes against the will of Hashem, who runs the world, created the world and runs the world, and even temporarily Hashem will pay back, which means that you won't benefit even temporarily, just you have pain. And the reason why we got to go through these struggles is so we can get the reward. Okay, so this is the introduction, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, in the beginning of the Parsha. So now we come to the end of the Parsha and we still see that person is still struggling. So we got to sort of do something more to further encourage him. Dalet b'shas men kum zu der sima sedre. When we come to the end of the sedre, zetmen, you see, as the Torah chazet iber kama as hodes oif arayis. The Torah repeats several warnings about arayis. Torah says again, al tetamu b'chol eilu goymer. Do not defile yourself in all this, etc. Ushmartem atem eschukoisa. You should keep my statutes. Goymer. So we see the Torah warns again about it. And further, they find the forewarning as durch over seine is that if you violate the sin of this promiscuous relationship, arayis, kuman verschiedene enshim, there are various types of punishments. Osik says, v'lo yisoki ha'aretz eschem, so that the land shall not vomit you. The Pasuk talks about getting cut off. And then finally we come to the last verse. Ushmartem es mishmarti, you shall keep my guard. Libilti asois mechukes hatu eves gomer, so not to do these abominable statues, do not defile yourself with them. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I'm God your God. So, what is these last few verses concluding the portion of Arayas? How would one approach this? Why is the Torah telling us? We would say this is just again a reinforcement. Is lulei dem siyum ani Hashem Elokeichem. If we did not have the end words ani Hashem Elokeichem, then we would have learned as those was the Torah chazet iber as horis hulu. Why does the Torah repeat warnings, etc.? Ushmartem es mishmarti, that you should keep my guard, v'lo yisitamu bahem, and you should not defile yourself. Is al derech v'Rashi hot mefarish given freer. This is similar, like Rashi explained earlier, by Isur for Achilles Rotzen v'chulu, as Rashi said, by the prohibition. The Torah repeats several times against eating the insects. Adosis lavir aleim b'lavin harbe. That the reason that it's repeated is so that you would violate many prohibitions. There's no better law, meridemol. The same prohibition. There's nothing added here, but the same prohibition is several times. So that would have been interpreted the sukkim without the last words Ani Hashem Elokeichem. V'bald aber as derbai wird übergechazert euch Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Since over here we're also repeating Ani Hashem Elokeichem, was in dem is neshaycha zu sagen harbe. You can't say that there is many. Well, there's one, the same Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Maybe you say harbe, lavin harbe, but this is not a lavin. This is not the prohibition. This is Ani Hashem Elokeichem. So what is the harbe here? Is das machriach zu sagen? So this forces us to say, as der ganze hemshech hasiyum, that this entire flow of the end is nit laver chula harbe, not like we learn to violating many other things to give you additional violations for the same thing. Not simo me'ena psicha, but rather the end of the parsha is somewhat of the opening of the parsha. Kishem the parsha Arayis Haipzuchon Mitahagdoma Vizirus Kloli, just as the portion of Arayis begins with an introduction and a general encouragement. Ani Hashem Elokeichem Kimas Eretz Mitzrayim Gomer Es Mishpos Eitasu Gomer Shmartem Es Chukoisa. I am Hashem Elokeichem. Don't do as the act of the Mitzrayim and keep my mishpatim, and you should keep the statutes. Derech zeh is der Siyum HaParsha mit an endlichen Zirus Kloli. Also, the end of the Parsha has a similar general encouragement. Ushmartem goimer ani Hashem Elokeichem. You should keep. It said that I am God, your God. So this is basically a general encouragement, not to repeat the Lavin, but a general encouragement, just like we had a general encouragement at the beginning. But what is the novelty? What is the new by the end? What are we coming to say more? In was besteht aber der Öftun Yisrael von dem Ziru B'Sima Parsha. In what consists the novelty, the advantage of the encouragement in the end of the Parsha, Legabe dem Ziru Shebetchiloso, relative to the encouragement that's in the beginning of the Parsha? Of them, Zokt Rashi, Rashi says, V'loi sitamu bahem ani Hashem Elokeichem. Don't defile yourself on it. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Der Chidush do besteht in dem Shlila. Im titamu eini Elokeichem. If you defile yourself, I will not be your God. That's the Chiddush here. The Chiddush beim Siyum Legabe dem Friedrich Zirus, the novelty by the end relative to the previous Zirus, und der Far kommt es besoif Siyum Parsha, and that's why it comes in the end of the Parsha. Der Ani Hashem Elokeichem shebedchilas HaParsha is in Yonam von Chiyuv. The beginning of the Parsha is mainly ideas of positive. The Eibishter is Geyser of Yidden Gezedes. Hashem decrees on Yidden decrees. And we're saying, on in Beide Kavim, Dayan li Pora, V'nem l'shalom schar, that he is a judge to collect and a worthy to pay reward. Then as is do einer, but that's positive, trying to push him to do all the mitzvahs because of these encouragement, because of the reward and the punishments. However, if all of these three details, knowing that and the Rebbe went through before, and the punishments and the rewards do not impact him, they don't infect him. He knows who is the one that giving the decree. He knows that he's going to pay the price for it. He's a judge to pay. And that he's going to lose the reward. But the type is but the desire, the lust is so strong. As a candidate by him the Nesoin, he cannot withstand the Nesoin. So now the Torah Moisif, B'Siyum Parsha, noch an Eufen, the Torah at the end of the Parsha adds an additional way, Vitzu Poilun, how to impact Oich of him, also through him. Durch Mediyah Zayin, to letting him know, as im titamu, ein Elokeichem. If you are defiled, I'm not your God. Das richt on der Verbindung von Ayid mit Neubischen. That actually touches that connection from Ayid with Hashem. As we see vividly, as when Ayid heard, when Ayid hears, as Acherei, such words, ein Elokeichem, I'm not your God, he becomes totally perturbed. He can't stand it. With the bewusster word, as the known word, Ayid nit ervil. Ayid not wants, neither wants, or nit erken, not is able, to be torn away from godliness. So that further encouragement is by telling him that if you actually defile yourself, and if everything before didn't work, now we're telling him that you are actually going to tear yourself, God forbid, away from Hashem. And that causes the person to sort of rethink. Api hanal bet man ook verstehen, was Rashi is mefaret. Based on the above, we'll understand why Rashi details when Gitzu the drei protim and has these three details. Ba'atem nifsolim ma'acharai, umahano yesh libochem, ba'atem eschayim kloy. About as their toichen as hora vizirus, since the content, the idea of the warning and the encouragement for Ani Hashem Elokeichem shebesima sedra, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, the end of the sedra, is bedugmet suminyan for Ani Hashem Elokeichem is similar to the idea of Ani Hashem Elokeichem shebetchilas parsha serayis. That is the beginning of the portion of Rayis. Under Chelek is Norvas Friere says in Chiyuv. The only difference is the beginning it's positive, and some Seif is Shalila, and the end it's negative. His move on is understood as Kshem via Ani Hashem Elokeichem, just like Ani Hashem Elokeichem in the positive. Shebetchilas parshas. In the beginning of the parsha is Koilul, the right protim includes three details. Yet der Wort abzunder prat, each word a separate detail. Kinal Baruch has explained earlier at length. Is al derech ze euch b'nei Hashem Elokeichem shebesima sedra. Similar to this, it's also b'nei Hashem Elokeichem that is the end of the sedra. As a zayin and koilel dizelbe drei protim, that they include the same three details, not in them oifon von shlila, but in the way of the negative. In the negative, but three details. That ani b'tchilas haparsha meant. What is the ani in the beginning of the parsha means? Do mi goyzer alechem. Know who is the one that decrees upon you. But does vice kinal? This points, as said earlier, wie der Eibishter vernimmt sich mit Eden, that the Eibishter takes care, occupies himself with the Eden, als sein Volk, as his people, his nation, welcher sagt on Gesedes, to which he instructs decrees. The Magbi Lozeh, corresponding to this, kum b'soif parsha, their tzad shlila comes in the end of the parsha, the negative side from Zelban Inyan, from the same idea. Atem nifsoli me'acharai, you are rejected from before me. Bal oich, yesh lemer oich meloshen psolocha also means carve out. Ois hakunun opteln, to chop out, to carve out and to separate. So this is the idea. Instead of being connected, Hashem is taking care of you, you will be disconnected. Nifsolim and psolocha also. And from Lashon of psolocha of ha'ishakan, b'magbil to the minyan pun havaya, corresponding to the idea of havaya, nemal l'shalom schar b'tchilas ha'parsha, trustworthy to pay the reward in the beginning of the parsha, was the tashlum schar vayst. What is the payment of reward point? As by them Eibishter is nachas ruach lufonai, that Hashem has a pleasantness of spirit before him at hotanof and avedis b'nei Yisrael, that he enjoys the service of b'nei Yisrael, and that's why there is payment. Kum der inyan fun umahano yesh lebochem. That what kind of a benefit shlilas hanoah, rejecting that hanoah. B'magbil zum inyan elokeichem, corresponding to the idea of elokeichem, which is dayan li porah b'tchilas haparsha. The beginning of the parsha, it says that elokeichem is I'm a judge to collect. Was vibal der Eibishter vernimmt sich mit in im zu meinish sein. Since Hashem occupies himself with the yid to punish him. That points to the close connection and the dearness amongst them. Especially based on what we know as the Einshim Shabbat the punishments of the Torah are for the benefit of the person. So by the end, it's warned Atem b'schayvim kloya, that you will be guilty and will be destroyed. That he is your life. So that brings to God forbid, to a level of kloya, because we lose Hashem's protection. But piha now, and based on the above, Move on, but Rashi, we also understand the Rashi Messiah Lekach Nemar Ani Hashem Lekech. The mitvil Rashi klor machen. Rashi means to make it very clear. I say Ani Hashem Lekechem. Rashi wants to make it clear. As those was zog the drei protim. That the fact that he says this detail is weil sie seine verbunden genau bederach shlilo, because they are connected. As I said before, in a negative way with the drei lashonis and posik Ani Hashem Lekechem, with Ani Hashem Lekechem, and these are the opposite of the Ani Hashem Lekechem in the beginning. Zion. Der is a Chassidus yesh levayir shayches from the drei protimen out to the drei lashonis. According to Chassidus, style of Chassidus, we can explain the three details to the three languages. Ani Hashem Elekechem b'ofen achar mehanal, differently than the above, in a different way than above. Ani is atzmusim husi yisbarach. That is the essence. Who is blessed is hecher funis habas ha'olam. That is higher than creation of the world. Masha ha'olam is mishavim mimenu. This is not the main godliness. The fact that the worlds are created from Hashem, that's not the main thing. There is more than just the world created from being created. There's atzmus hecher. Alpha became vert euch. So still with ani nimshach im Welt, ani becomes extends into the world. That is through the service of Torah and mitzvahs that they're mamshich the ani in the world. Like we say, that Hashem wanted to have a dira in this low world, as durch Torah and mitzvahs machen in the Welt for a dira latzmusam husis baruch. That through Torah and mitzvahs he didn't make this world for a dwelling place for the essence of husis baruch. Punkt wie in diras Odom, just like in a person's home. The atmos Odom dorba hadira, the essence of the person lives in the dira. So when we say that we're making a dira, we're mamshich the atmos of the Insof through the Torah mitzvah. That's hani. Then you have the level of Havaya. Havaya is Melosh Mahab, that he creates. Your power and your energy. That is the level of godliness that dresses up in the created being. Created, Havaya, Ani is the essence, Havaya is the created world, that dresses up in the human being. And then Rashi says, but if you defile yourself, I'm not your God. Und das drückt sich aus in the alle drei Inyonim, and this expresses itself in all three matters. The first Inyan, as a following, that I'm not going to be your God, is was atem nifsolim acherei. You are nifsol from behind me. Acherei b'chinas acherayim is Shem Elikim. Acherayim is the name of Elikim, is the Acherayim. Und Eden werden nifsol abgeschnitten von dem Koyach HaPoel benifol Shem Elikim, and Eden become cut off from the Koyach HaPoel benifol from the Shem Elikim. That's the first. The Aveda for Eden is Goyim Taneg L'mayla. Normally, the Aveda of Eden causes pleasure above. Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu Lislei Dir B'Tachtoin. Hashem's desire. So there's a taiva. So there's an enjoyment. But this is the Taneg Atzmus Ani from Avedas Torah Mitzvahs. That's the delight of the Atzmus from Ani of Avedas Torah Mitzvahs. Is Im Titamu. But if you defile Ma'ano Yesh L'Bachem, they don't have the Hanod, that the Sabbath, they did it with Tachtoinim, there's no Hanod. And then no, then you'll be guilty of Kloya. Nit nor as is the Dishlila from Koyach HaPoel Benifo. Not only that, there is a negation, there is no Poel Benifo. Nor as Ver Dishlila Mitzad Havaya, the whole creation becomes negated. Klolusi in his is the general idea of creation. Noch dem Rashi is over Misayim, but the Rashi is Lekach Nemer Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Still, that's why it says Ani Hashem Elokeichem. The Mekuven from the Azoris is nit as Ol Zayin Chaz v'Sholom Zayin as Amatzot. The intent of all these warnings is not that God forbid there should be such a situation. But as Ol Zayin Der Chiv, we want the positive Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Und der Fahrer, as Afal Pi Der Chidish in Der Azor Do. Although the novelty of the warning over here, relative to the beginning of the parsha, is the shlila, if you defile yourself, I'm not you God. So this is what we're coming to in the end. I'm glad you got. Well, the matore is because the goal is as Zayin Ani Hashem Elokeichem, that it should be Ani Hashem Elokeichem, as Zayin the Hanoah. There should be this enjoyment. I'm God, you guys. The essence, the mahus of the Eberster comes in an inner, bizas der ani, to the extent that you vert, havaya lekechem, comes your God, kechachem b'chayuschem via the read, the power and the energy of every yid. That is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Acherei Tovshin Lamed Hey.